So I'm currently 6 months into completing my placement, and I get a lot of messages from people who are in second year and looking to apply for placements. And the questions range anywhere from how to write a CV to where did I find my job and how am I finding my job. And I won't be talking about my specific job role and the company I work for in this video because we have a lot of social media policies in place. To summarize it, I've had an amazing experience at the company I work for, but that's not what this video is about. So when answering people, I usually give them the same 2-3 pieces of advice, and I feel like I could really expand upon that more, especially in a video format. And I can also just send this video to future people that ask me questions. I can also just reply in the comment section if anyone has any further questions. I think it's very helpful. Like when I applied for my placement, I was literally like completely going into it dark. I didn't even know how to write a CV when I first started. So yeah, I'm going to be covering the most frequently asked questions along with my own tips and tricks that I've learned from university, I've learned from my own experience, and I've learned through my own research. So hopefully this video is useful to someone. And a huge disclaimer before the video starts is just because you follow all of the steps in this video, it doesn't mean you're guaranteed a placement, obviously. I feel like that goes without saying, but from my personal experience and from a few other people I've talked to, getting a placement takes a lot of time and dedication, and it is quite literally like taking on an extra module that you don't get any support with, and you usually have to navigate by yourself. So it doesn't translate that the more effort you put in, the more likely you are to get a placement. I think there is other factors at play. I want to correct myself actually. I wanted to say it doesn't equate that the amount of time you put in equals the more likely you are to get placement, because obviously you are working with a very restricted amount of time trying to get all of your other assignments in and trying to do exams whilst also taking on this other workload. What I mean by that is if you spend time sending out 500 job applications and you're not securing a placement, sometimes that means that you need to go back and refine what you were sending out. And my top advice is, instead of sending out 500 easy apply applications with the same generic CV and the same generic cover letter, you need to come back, let's say apply to 50 jobs, and you really fine tune and specialize each CV and cover letter for each specific role, and you spend hours researching the company and doing retakes of your one-way interviews and rewriting your assessment answers. This is what I mean by not necessarily working harder and spending more hours, but being more thoughtful and precise with what you are doing and how you are spending your time throughout this process. I hope that makes sense. So the first tip is do not press easy apply, because it will just give your details to telemarketers. Next question, researching your placement. Now my advice truly would be to just apply to as many opportunities that seem interesting to you as you can. Obviously prioritize the ones that you're 100%, I want to work for this company, I want to do this role. But I would also suggest broadening your horizons and going outside what you think you would be interested in, because again, you increase your chances. The more places you apply for at a high quality, the more likely you are to secure a placement. But if you do see one role and you don't really know how to feel about it and you don't really know much about the company, I would recommend looking on Glassdoor. And Glassdoor is, obviously, if you don't know what it is, it's a company where prior employees can talk about their experience. I feel like the nature of the website is that you will either get really good reviews or really bad reviews. I often don't find people in the middle. It is worth saying, take a pinch of salt with everything everyone says, but the same goes for a website, Rate My Placement. You can search up companies on here, see if anyone's had previous experience with them and see is it worth my time applying for this company, or do they treat their interns quite poorly? Do they treat all of their employees quite poorly? And yeah, prior employees just basically talk about their experience, and this could help eliminate a few of the options, a few of the businesses out. If you see, they don't treat their employees very well, maybe I don't want to apply there. Talking to prior interns is another good suggestion. Obviously, I do get a lot of people messaging me because they want to work at my company next year. However, I would always be mindful of how many questions you do ask and the nature of the questions you ask. For me personally, I reply to as many people as I can, because I would have loved to have that advice when it was me this time last year. However, I have had some people who do send me 8 or 9 questions in a row, and it is the work day and I am doing my job. And then I have had other people like directly ask me for my CV, which has all of my personal details on it and my work experience, which won't be helpful for you. Like, no, I'm not going to send you my CV. So I think it is worth mentioning that there are boundaries that you shouldn't cross. And if you message an intern and ask them like a decent set of questions and they don't answer you, it's not them saying like, fuck off, I don't want to talk to you. It's just them like being in full-time work, and maybe they have other things to do and they might get back to you or they might not. You can't expect an answer from everybody. But I still think it is worth to follow people on LinkedIn if they are working in the company that you are interested in, and seeing what they repost day to day and, you know, what achievements the company has got and what things they've been working on. I feel like that is another good insight into researching a future placement. And I'm just going to list off some places that you can find placement years. Target Jobs, LinkedIn, obviously, Sam Social Media Club, Hiring Careers. Honestly, if you just search placement career opportunities, ignore Indeed. I don't really trust Indeed, but if you look online, and specifically there's a lot of like university focused websites, you can just go through there, because a lot of the time these companies are wanting these websites to market their jobs to students. So sometimes you're more likely to go on a placement specific website rather than just on LinkedIn, where you have to filter through like ones that are just like summer internships and stuff like that. That is quite time consuming on LinkedIn. General CV tips. Now, the most important thing I think you would take away from this video is something called ATS compliant CVs. So if your CV is looked at by an employer, they will typically spend about 8 seconds looking and scanning through each CV. So it is important when formatting your CV to make it easy for the employer to see the key points. However, if the company does use AI to scan CVs, which is very common, you will need to make your CV ATS compliant. So what is ATS, I hear you ask? Well, I'll answer that for you right now. An ATS-friendly CV is a resume formatted for Applicant Tracking System, ATS, the software companies use to scan, sort, and rank job applications, ensuring it passes these filters to reach a human recruiter by using simple layouts, standard fonts, clear headings, and relevant keywords from the job description, whilst avoiding complex designs, graphics, tables, and text boxes that confuse the software. Now, this is not specifically something that my university talked to me about when I was applying for jobs. Obviously, they did say the typical like black and white and use like font size 12, but they didn't tell me specifically to my face not to use text boxes and all of this stuff. And I was also applying for a creative job, so I didn't know if maybe they wanted my CV to look a bit like funky, a bit more personalized. But I ended up applying to about 25 placements with my original CV. I'll put it here and just blur out all of my personal details, but it was basically an off-white and an off-black text. It was sort of like yellow and brown, and I did not hear back from any jobs, and I wasn't sure why, because I had the exact same information in that CV as I do in my current one. However, it is because when I applied for L'Oreal, I think it was, I had uploaded my CV and I went to look back at it and see like, oh, like what would it look like from the employer's point of view when they open my CV? And this was the first time I realized that all of my text was jumbled up. Literally, like dates were over here, words were over here, some were down there. Like it was completely messed up. And I was so upset because I really wanted one of these job roles. And I put it on my private story, and then someone from another university replied to me and they said, oh, do you not know about ATS? And I was like, no. And that's when I found out about ATS. So yeah, you can basically download an ATS compliant template online. And then once you fill out all your details, you can put it through another website where you'll just say like, is my CV ATS compliant? Put it through the website and it would be like 100% yes, or it would be like, oh no, maybe you've got like different margins or text boxes and it's like confusing the AI system. Therefore, I just think it's better to start off from scratch, just using an ATS compliant template, because it then works if a person reads your CV and if an AI reads your CV, versus having a personalized CV that then gets jumbled up when you put it through ATS. And unfortunately, I don't know how to feel about AI being used in the job interview process, but AI is being increasingly used for interview processes and like scanning CVs. Therefore, it is important to use keywords from the job description within your CV so that the AI reads it and it goes, hard worker, check. Adobe Photoshop experience, check. So moving on from ATS, I'll get a little bit back to that later on. So the second point is to quantify everything. And what I mean by this is, instead of saying I'm a hard worker because I outperformed my colleagues at my last job, you need to tell them like how much by, like, did you outperform them by 10%, 100%, 200%? You need to give context to the statements you're saying. My second point would be to, first of all, format your CV in bullet points. Then when you have the bullet points, start each line with an action verb. So this could be collaborated, envisioned, implemented, etc., etc. And on that point, use technical terms where you can and mirror the language that the company uses in their job description. Another tip is that if you are someone that has a lot of experience, don't include everything on your CV, like just pick what is relevant to the job. And also you can sort of reword stuff to more fit like the type of person they want. Like, you can not twist the truth, but there is a sort of way about writing your prior experiences that you can sort of convey the message that you do fit this sort of role, if you know what I mean.
I didn't explain that very well at all. There's a way of selling yourself at a higher standard. Like, you still have the experience, but you're making it seem a bit more impressive, and you're not lying, but you're just using better wording to make the same skill seem more attractive. That's what I mean.
Like, say for example, you have a group project at university and say you put in more effort than other people. Would you say that, you know, you have experience working in a group, or would you say that you have experience taking the leadership role and having initiative and managing a team of 6 people? Like, I'm not saying lie on your CV, but I am saying certain aspects of your CV can seem more impressive to an employer if you just reword them differently, because you still have the same experience, you're just not marketing yourself as well. So yeah, my third point was match your skills to the job description. And my fourth point is to have a generalized CV and a generalized cover letter, where basically the parts you would want to change is on the CV, you have a personal profile at the top. You would obviously want to alter that for every job that you apply to, because say you're applying to fashion merchandising at one company, but fashion forecasting at another company. In your personal profile, you don't want to say to the forecasting company, oh, I really love visual merchandising, because they'll be like, why are you applying for us then? So on a CV, you can personalize the personal profile at the top depending on what job you apply to. However, it is important to note that sometimes that's not recommended. Like, it really always just like a matter of opinion. If you're applying for a very serious job where like it's not so much personality based, maybe you don't want that personal profile. But if you're working in like a team or like something creative and you want to give more context as to who you are, maybe it is worth having a personal profile. And then for the cover letter, you basically discuss like your experience, your roles, and then your research about the company, and then like why you think you would be suitable. Obviously that goes without saying, personalize that for each company. Do not hand the same cover letter in for 2 different roles. Like, that's blasphemous. Like, don't do that. Especially because like paragraph 3 or 4 should be you talking about the company's history and why it matters to you and why you're relevant to work for them. Do not talk about Ralph Lauren and when you're applying to Burberry. Like, you definitely 100% need to specialize your cover letter. And what I'm not saying is obviously write one from scratch. Just use a template and then change parts to apply for the jobs, because it's time efficient, but you're also still spending time researching the company and telling them why you are a good fit for the role. Now, I was up last night thinking about things to say in this video, so I'm just going to go through a quick fire list of all of the things you should do or shouldn't do for your CV. Avoid using personal pronouns. Have a consistent format across your CV and covering letter. Have a font size of 10 to 12 with Arial or Calibri to look clean and modern. Add your LinkedIn to the top of your CV and hyperlink your page. Keep your formatting simple, no boxes or columns, and no borders, no photographs, and avoid CV templates. Now, I want to talk about that a little bit more in depth, because it is depending on like what role you are applying for. But me personally, I would never put a profile picture on a CV. They can look at my LinkedIn for that, because my LinkedIn has my face on it if they really need to, but they shouldn't need to know what I look like anyway. And when my advice says no templates, I mean in the sense that when you it's very obvious when someone uses a CV template and it just looks like you don't really care. Like they've got like a little blue column there, and it's quite Americanized as well, I've realized. Like I'll put up some examples maybe that I found on Canva. Like don't use those, especially because if you do decide to use color and profile pictures and stuff, you're probably applying for a creative role. And in that sense, you should be making your own CV template anyway. What I mean by downloading a CV template is literally just a black and white one. Like, I'm not saying download one that like has all of these like design features on it. That's not what I mean. Just download a CV template that's ATS compliant, that is black and white and very plain and simple. I'll put an example here. Back onto the quickfire advice. So use bullet points. Do not use stars or like little ticks. Use bullet points, and each bullet point should only be 2 to 3 lines, because again, the employer is reading it or scanning it in about 8 seconds before you get moved on to the next stages. Have your dates on either the left hand or the right hand and be consistent throughout your CV. Do not put education and then the dates on the other side and then the dates over here in your job experience on this side. Like, keep it all like uniform and easy to read. This is a grammar one. Either use all full stops and commas or don't use any at all. Don't interchangeably sometimes use commas in bullet points, and sometimes like you need to stick to one and you need to keep it consistent. Education goes from most recent to oldest, obviously. Degree first, relevant modules, include all of your relevant qualifications. Also include your grades or perhaps your expected grade, your work experience, which can also include volunteering or unpaid work. Now, my university told me that I could include interests. I'm not sure about that. Like, I guess if you don't have like any volunteering work and you don't have any experience doing any work and like roles, I guess you can talk about what you're interested in. Me personally, I wouldn't put that on my CV. That's just me. It's more talking about like why I have the skills that I have, not what music I like to listen to, you know what I mean? I do get what they're saying. They're saying like if you listen to relevant podcasts about like the industry, but I don't know, take that one with a pinch of salt. I don't know if I'd do that personally. It's more something you talk about in a later stage interview than you put on your CV. But it also says to put your achievements. That is very true. If you have won any awards, or you've won like any like competitions related to the field, of course, I think it is good to put those on your CV. So my university said, we don't recommend a personal profile unless it is specifically asked for by the employer, or the CV does not have a covering letter within it. If you do include one, it should be tailored to the specific role you're applying for and include relevant experience and what you were looking for. So for me personally, for my job, I did put a personal profile, but in my experience, I think that was quite important to put straight on my CV because it gives some context as to like why I switched industries. And, you know, I think that was quite, for me, it made sense to put a personal profile because I was literally jumping from one industry to the other without any prior experience. And these are just some optional things you can add to your CV. You could do additional courses, positions of responsibility leadership, publications, voluntary work, additional skills, technical skills, and project work. And the last thing to note about CVs is typically your CV will be 2 pages. Certain industries like I think investment banking uses 1-page CVs, but for the most part, your CV will be 2 pages. And if it goes over 2 pages, you need to trim some stuff out. So that was like the main chunk of the video. I feel like I got through a lot of stuff in the CV section. But another thing I have been asked about a few times is what if my degree doesn't suit the job role? I'll use myself as an example. I do a degree in fashion marketing and I have a background of doing textiles and art alongside like English and geography. So I've very much always gone like streamlined myself for fashion. And then my current role is in TV and it's in social media marketing. Sorry about the scenery change. My microphone did die, so I've had to move to a less echoey room. So I've been pretty streamlined for a career in fashion. However, that's not the direction I chose to go. I might do it in the future, but I've ended up in a role in TV and social media. And a lot of people have asked, like, how do you sort of make that transition and show your employer that you're still suitable for the job, even though your education background is different? And I will note that I do fashion marketing and then social media is a part of marketing, so they are still linked. However, in my interviews, especially in my final stage interview, I honestly just discussed my reasons for why I didn't want to work in the fashion industry right now, and I just had a genuine conversation. And I also showed my passion for social media in the fact that I've run my own YouTube channel since I was like 8 years old, I have my own TikTok account. I've had viral videos before, and I'm chronically online, basically, very up to date with social trends. And as long as you display the fact that you have this skill set, it just might not be specialized for the certain industry, but you are still a good candidate for the role. As long as you can like explain how your skills can transfer over to the role, you have a pretty good chance. If you're able to explain in depth and reasonably why you think, even though you have this background in this other industry, you would do really well in this other industry and why they should hire you, you're okay. And another important thing to note, especially in creative fields, it is really, really important to list the applications that you know how to use. For example, Premiere Pro, Illustrator, like all Adobe programs, After Effects, Photoshop, and you need to list like how many years of experience you have using these, because even if the company don't use Adobe, often the skills are quite transferable to a different application, and you have a higher level of understanding of how the application will work over like a complete beginner. And usually for placements as well, especially in creative fields, these are often like requirements, like you need at least like a year's experience using some sort of software or application in order to qualify for the role. And another common question is how to deal with rejection. And me personally, I literally got rejected from about 50 roles. The current role I'm in is the only interview I had throughout all of my applications. I did get a phone call from another placement role, however, it never came to fruition. I don't know what happened, but like I had already secured my first one anyway, so I wasn't going to chase it up. But honestly, the first few rejections you will get, especially when you think it was like a cover letter and an interview round that you absolutely nailed, it is quite heartbreaking, to be honest. It is quite an ego hit because you spent literally hours answering all of their assessment questions, doing one-way interviews, and it is quite a gut punch. I won't sugarcoat it, it does hurt, but the more rejections you get, the easier it is to deal with them and to keep going on. And if you are genuinely quite like shaken up about a rejection, like maybe it was a role like you had really been dreaming of, like it's okay to take a few days off and just like recompose yourself. And the most important part is to question like, why did they reject you? Sometimes companies will give you a list and they'll give you an answer, especially in the later stage interviews. They might tell you like why they decided to go with another candidate or like what you could improve on. But specifically with larger companies, if you do email them back and be like, can you give me advice on why I didn't get the role, they might not answer you. Like a lot of the time it is like a do not reply email address. If it's a smaller company and you ask them politely, like, thank you so much for the experience, could you please explain to me like areas I could improve on for the future, they might get back to you. But often it will have to be like a self-reflection, and like after you finished, say like a one-way interview or a face-to-face interview, was there anything coming out of that experience that you thought, I could have done that better? Or maybe there was something you didn't talk about because you had just forgot, because it is quite nerve-wracking. Like the best way to deal with rejection is to turn it into a positive on how you can improve. And this moves me on to my last section, which is the most important step, I think: keeping a planner, keeping a tracker of every single job you have applied for, what the salary is, if there is a salary, what company it is, and then most importantly, dates for interviews and what information you had given them thus far. Say you're doing like 10 applications like on a rolling window all at once. You may forget that you've talked to one company about your background in social media, but you haven't even mentioned it to another company, and you just assume that they know, and then that could like be a missed opportunity. So the best thing I did was every single written assessment or recorded interview, anything like that, I would keep a track of what I've said, and I would put it in this doc, or I put it in my notes app, and I would just have all of the information I have given them so far, just to keep track of like what they know about me and what they don't know about me yet. And then also on your tracker you can put like the status, like have you gone through an interview, have you been flat out rejected, or have you accepted an offer, which is obviously the final part. And especially for in-person interviews or final stage interviews, after you have like followed all of these steps and you've gotten through some rounds and like they already know about your skills, they know about like how hard working you are, all of that stuff, I think a very important part, depends on the industry, but a very important part is conveying your personality, because a lot of the time your hiring manager like might actually be working with you on your team. For me personally, the two people in my final stage interview were my manager and my senior manager. So I honestly think after all of like the hard working and the skills and quantifying everything, I think it's very important to like take a deep breath, calm your nerves, and actually like show them your personality and who you would be day to day, and like just it takes a little bit of like the pressure off, like to not feel like you're acting as like this robot that's supposed to be perfect. Like you've got to have a little bit of personality, because at the end of the day they are going to be working with you, and people want to hire someone that they think they can get along with, is a team player, is like positive, brings like a positive energy to the team. If there is two candidates, that there's you and there's someone else, and you both have the same level of skill set and there's no other differentiation between you having just a bit more of a positive attitude and just showing who you are as a person might make the company more likely to pick you over someone who is just a little less, I don't know, just doesn't have as much like flair to them. But yeah, I think that is everything I wanted to cover in the video. Of course, as always, you can leave a comment down below, ask me a question about placements, and I'll try and get back to you. And yeah, good luck to everyone who is applying, and I hope you secure one.